Hi, it's me again, your criminology review partner. For now, let us discuss a little about juvenile delinquency. But before that, please support, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more criminology-related contents. Without further ado, let's proceed. So, let us first understand what is juvenile delinquency. By definition, it refers to an antisocial acts or behaviors committed by minors which are contrary to the norms of the society. It involves oftentimes misdemeanor, but may include offenses and felonies. But before anything else, let us first distinguish the difference between crime and juvenile delinquency. The major difference is, crime is an act committed by an adult, while delinquency are acts committed by minors. An act that breaks criminal code which is created by society through written law, while juvenile delinquency are acts that merely breaks cultural law or norms. A person who committed crime can be dealt with in accordance with the criminal justice system. A child is under the process known as juvenile justice system. And now, we will trace down the history of juvenile delinquency. First is Code of Hammurabi. Oldest known code for 1,000 years ago, dating 2170 BC, used by society to regulate behavior and at the same time punish those who disobeyed the rules. It established a social order based on individual rights. It is the origin of the legal principle of lex talionis, or lex talionis, that is, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. In 1641, General Court of Massachusetts passed the Stubborn Child Law, which stated that children who disobeyed their parents could be put to death. Roman law and canon church law approximately 2,000 years ago made distinction between juveniles and adults based on the notion age of responsibility. Ancient Jewish law. The Talmud specified condition under which immaturity was to be considered in imposing punishment. There was no corporal punishment prior to puberty, which was considered to be the age of 12 for females and 13 for males. In addition, no capital punishment is to be imposed on those offenders under 20 years of age. Next is codification of Roman law. In 5th century BC, this law resulted in the 12 Itables. Children were criminally responsible for violation of law and were to be dealt with by same criminal justice system as adults. Under this law, children came to be classified as infants, or proximus infantiae in general. Infants 7 years old below were not held criminally responsible, but those approaching puberty above 7 to 14 for boys and above 7 to 12 for girls. Liability was based on their capacity to understand the difference between right and wrong. Anglo-Saxon common law or based on custom or usage. Children under the age of 7 were presumed incapable of forming criminal intent, and therefore were not subject to criminal sanctions. Children between 7–14 were not subject to criminal sanctions unless it could be demonstrated that they had formed criminal intent, understood the consequences of their actions, and could distinguish right from wrong. Children over 14 were treated much the same as adults. And in the middle of 19th century, it included the child-saving movement. Concerned citizens eventually formed a social activist group called Child Savers, who believed that children were born good and became bad. Juvenile children were blamed on bad environments. This led to the creation of the doctrine parens patriae. Parens patriae is a doctrine that does not consider delinquent acts as criminal violation, thus making delinquents non-criminal persons and cannot be found guilty of a crime and punished like an adult criminal. This doctrine viewed minors who violated law as victims of improper care, custody and treatment at home. Thus, in parens patriae, the state becomes the father. Law Act of 1601 provided for involuntary separation of children from their impoverished parents, and these children were then placed in bondage to local residents as apprentices. That is all about the history of the conduct of juvenile delinquency and the punishments back then. And now let us proceed to PHILIPPINE Settings. PD 603, the Child and Youth Welfare Code. Under the said law, a person was over 9 but under 21 years of age at the time of the commission of the offence who committed a crime is known as a youthful offender. But the provisions of this law was amended by PD 1179. Under the said law, it defines a youthful offender as a child, minor or youth, including one who is emancipated in accordance with law who is over 9 years, but under 18 years of age at the time of the commission of the offence. And in the new law specifically are 9,344. 15 years old and below are exempted from criminal liability, while over 15 and below 18 are likewise exempted, unless acted with discernment and this child called child in conflict with law. Now let's move on to personalities and dates that needs to be noted on the rise of juvenile delinquency. Pope Clement XI, in 1704 in Rome, established the Hospital of St. Michael's, the first institution for the treatment of juvenile offenders. The stated purpose of the hospital was to correct and instruct unruly youth so they might become useful citizens. Next will be Robert Young. In 1788, established the first private separate institution for youthful offenders in England. Third is Albert Cohen, the first man who attempted to find out the process of beginning of the delinquent subculture. Kingwood Reformatory. This was established for the confinement of the hordes of unruly children who infested the streets of new industrial towns of England. Next is New York Committee on Pauperism. In 1818, the committee gave the term juvenile delinquency its first public recognition by referring it as a major cause of pauperism. 1899, the first juvenile or family court was established in Cook County, Illinois. The last date to remember is the year 1899-1967. This has been referred to as the era of socialized juvenile justice. That will be the important things we need to remember on the discovery of juvenile delinquency. Next we will proceed to House of Corrections for juvenile delinquent. Bridewalls, it was the first houses of corrections in England. They confined both children and adults considered to be idle and disorderly. Next is Hospice of St. Michael. St. Michael was established in 1704. John Howard, a former, brought to England from Rome a model of the first institution for treating juvenile offenders. He was often thought of as the father of prison reform. Lastly, the House of Refuge. It was situated in New York in 1825. It was open to house juvenile delinquents, who were defined in its charter as youths convicted of criminal offences or found in vagrancy. That is all about the brief history of juvenile delinquency. Stay tuned for updates on more criminology-related contents. Please do watch, share and subscribe. Thanks. Until next video. Stay updated.